Spring 344 A.D. The air in Ctesiphon hangs thick with the scent of river mud from the Tigris mingled with the sharp tang of unwashed bodies crammed into the holding pens beyond the palace walls. You stand there, chains biting into your wrists, the iron cold and unyielding against skin chafed raw from weeks of marching under guard. The sounds come, next low murmurs of prayer in Aramaic, the clank of spears as Persian spearmen shift their weight, the distant bleat of goats being herded for the royal kitchens. Your breath catches as the great doors swing open, revealing the throne room columns of polished alabaster veined with gold tapestries, depicting Ahura Mazda's eternal triumph over chaos. And at the center, the dais where Shapur II sits his diadem, glinting like a captured star. He is young, still barely 35, his face sharp as a falcon's eyes. Dark pools that have already seen the spill of Roman blood at Singara. But it's the floor that undoes you, marble slick with something darker than polish, streaked from the last audience where a deacon from Arbela met his end for refusing the king's poll tax. The guards shove you forward and the crowd parts nobles in silk caftans, Zoroastrian priests with their white caps tilted in disapproval, Christian elders from the villages, their faces gaunt but unbowed. Shapur leans forward, his voice a silken blade. "Bishop Simeon, you will pay the double levy for your Roman god, or your church will pay in flesh." The room falls silent, save for the drip of water from a fountain shaped like a lion's maw. You meet his gaze, the words forming on your tongue like stones. In that heartbeat, the empire's fault line cracks open. This is no mere tax dispute. This is the moment when faith becomes treason, when a king's suspicion ignites a pyre for thousands. What kind of realm forges loyalty from broken spines? Before we go further, I need to be transparent. What you're about to hear involves systematic torture, the deliberate machinery of pain designed to extract submission from the human soul. These details are historically documented, drawn from the Syriac acts of the Persian martyrs, corroborated by Roman historians like Simeon and Theodoret, and analyzed in modern scholarship such as Sebastian Brock's editions of the martyr texts and Richard Payne's studies on Sasanian religious policy. But they are deeply disturbing, evoking the raw edge of power, unchecked. If this weighs too heavy, if the shadows here press too close, step away without a second thought. There's no shame in guarding your own light. For those who remain, I commit to this with care, will trace not just the wounds, but the system that inflicted them, the political calculus, the psychological warfare, the erasure of identity that turned neighbors into informants. These aren't tales to thrill or horrify for sport. They're dispatches from a borderland where empires clashed over souls, warnings etched in bone about what happens when faith is recast as espionage. Let's honor that gravity together. This wasn't holy war. This was asset management. In the 4th century, as the Roman Empire under Constantine pivoted toward Christianity, baptismal waters still fresh on imperial brows, the Sassanid realm across the frontier saw not a spiritual awakening, but a security threat. Christians once tolerated as a quirky minority in Persia's mosaic of faiths suddenly became potential fifth columnists. Their prayers a cipher for Roman intrigue. Shapur II, that iron-willed sovereign who ruled for 70 years, didn't unleash persecution from divine fervor alone. No, this was a machine taxes doubled to fund border forts, informants rewarded with confiscated estates, torture protocols refined like any administrative decree. The acts of the Persian martyrs, penned in Syriac by eyewitnesses mere decades after the events detail, not random cruelties but a calibrated campaign, starting with edicts in 339, escalating through the 340s, claiming thousands from Ctesiphon to the Kushan marches. Roman chroniclers like Simeon, writing in the 440s, amplified these accounts, turning private agonies into public indictments, fueling diplomatic ruptures and the border skirmishes of the 350s. What began as Persia's internal purge echoed across the Euphrates, a scandal that branded Shapur not just a king, but a desecrator in the eyes of a Christianizing West. The question isn't whether you can stomach the truth of those damp cells and heated irons. It's whether you're willing to remember it, not as ancient spectacle, but as blueprint. In boardrooms today where algorithms flag disloyal employees, or in regimes that rebrand dissent as foreign meddling, the parallels whisper, power doesn't need gods to justify erasure. It needs ledgers. These voices from the dust demand we listen lest we rebuild the same gears. If you believe these silenced testimonies deserve resurrection from the archives, consider subscribing. Every engagement unearths another fragment from the forgotten fringes. To understand what happened to those captives, the priests dragged from their altars, the nuns herded like livestock through the desert passes, you need to grasp the machine that ground them down. The Sassanid Empire in the early 4th century was no fragile theocracy, but a colossus of engineered obedience stretching from the Indus to the Anatolian highlands, its veins pulsing with tribute from silk routes and slave markets. Founded 2 centuries earlier by Ardashir Vespasi, who toppled the Parthian aristocracy in a coup blessed by Zoroastrian fire priests, it mimicked Rome's bureaucratic spine while wrapping it in Ahura Mazda's divine mandate. Cities like Ctesiphon, twin to Seleucia on the Tigris, buzzed with administrative scribes tallying grain silos and cavalry rosters. Tax collectors known as mobads enforced levies with the precision of astrologers charting eclipses. Economically, it thrived on arbitrage Persian horses traded for Roman glass, Bactrian spices for Cappadocian wool. But the real currency was loyalty enforced through a network of spa beds, regional lords who doubled as spies. Socially, hierarchies were etched in stone. The Wuzurgan nobility lounged in vaulted iwans overlooking irrigated gardens, while peasants toiled under corvée labor, their Zoroastrian rites the glue holding fragile alliances. Yet, cracks ran deep. To the west, Rome's legions probed at Nisibis and Amida. To the south, Arab Bedouins raided like locusts. And within minorities, Jews in Babylonian enclaves, Manichaeans whispering dualist heresies. Christians clustered in Syriac-speaking villages were assets to be monitored, not threats unless activated. Enter the Christians, that peculiar sect born in Roman Judea 2 centuries prior, now numbering perhaps 1/10 of Persia's subjects. Tolerated under Shapur I for their utility as physicians and scribes, they built basilicas from Gundishapur to Susa, their bishops convening synods in Edessa's shadow. But Constantine's Edict of Milan in 313 changed the calculus. By 325 at Nicaea, Christianity crowned Rome's pantheon, its cross a battle standard. Persian courtiers ever attuned to frontier whispers murmured of Roman sympathizers in the church hierarchy, bishops like Simeon, Bar Sabba'e, whose liturgies echoed Constantinople's creeds. Shapur II, ascending amid this shift, saw not co-religionists, but a Trojan horse. According to Sozomen's Ecclesiastical History, composed from refugee testimonies, the king issued edicts in 339 demanding Christians affirm loyalty by trampling crosses and paying double taxes, a head tax, on faith itself. Refusal meant confiscation, then exile, then the inquisitors. Archaeological digs at sites like Hira, unearthed in the 1970s by Iraqi teams, corroborate this charred basilica foundations from the 340s, inscribed ossuaries bearing Aramaic pleas for deliverance. Recent scholarship like Richard Payne's A State of Mixture 2015 reframes it not as religious mania, but geopolitical triage Christians as Roman assets in a zero-sum rivalry. A letter from Constantine to Shapur, preserved in Eusebius's Life of Constantine, pleaded for clemency. These people are my subjects no more. Treat them as your own. But it arrived too late, postmarked by paranoia. The machine word-to-life edicts dispatched via royal couriers on swift dromedaries, villages ringed by Aswaran cavalry torture chambers, stocked in every garrison. This wasn't conquest's chaos. This was protocol, a ledger of souls balanced against imperial security. And at its heart, a king manufactured not by birth alone, but by the empire's unyielding forge. He wasn't born to be this. Shapur in the Pahlavi script, meaning son of the king, entered the world in 309 AD, not with a cry, but a coronation. His father Hormizd II had ruled a scant 4 years his reign, a blur of purges against fractious Marsbands and failed thrusts into Roman Armenia. Poisoned some, whispered by his own priests, offended at his dalliances with foreign cults, or felled by a fever from the Mesopotamian swamps. In the vacuum, the court turned to the womb. Ifra Hormizd, the queen mother heavy with child, was draped in royal purple while still pregnant, the diadem placed on her belly, in a rite as ancient as Achaemenid fire altars. Labor came amid chants. the boy emerged squalling his tiny brow, already banded with gold. Shapur, they named him the second of that line, but whispers followed a regency puppet, his cries drowned by the clatter of Seleucid coins in the treasury. Ifra Hormizd shaped him first, that formidable widow, whose portraits on rock reliefs at Nakshi Rostam show a woman with coiled braids and eyes like polished onyx, her authority unyielding as the Zagros peaks. Daughter of a Wuzurgan house from Fars, she navigated the snake pit of Ctesiphon's Anderun the women's quarters, where intrigue bloomed like nightshade. Under her regency from 309 to 325, she crushed revolts in Khuzestan and Media, her couriers bearing heads on pikes to deter the ambitious. Shapur toddler to youth in her shadow, learned power not from scrolls, but spectacles. Public floggings in the Maidan, where crowds bayed as traitors' estates were auctioned. Zoroastrian yazatas invoked at equinox, fires their smoke curling like omens. Ifra doted yet disciplined tales in the Shahname's later echoes, paint her reading him Pahlavi epics of heroic kings, her voice steady as she described Rustam's slaying of foes. But loss came early. By 320, Arab raiders from Hira sacked border outposts. Ifra dispatched armies, but fever claimed her in 324, her body interred in a fire temple at Istakhr, her sarcophagus carved with lions rampant. Shapur, 15 now, wept not publicly, kings do not, but in private his tutors noted a hardening of gaze that lingered on the executioner's axe. The nobles circled next those Wuzurgan scions with estates from the Caspian to the Gulf, their personalities as varied as their sigils. Artabanus the regent prime, a bluff warrior with a beard like tangled wire, who drilled the boy in archery till his fingers blistered. Mir Narse, the Mobad of Mobads, gaunt and ascetic, his white robes whispering of purity laws, while his ledgers tallied tithes. They schooled him in statecraft, the Dagestan sacred jurisprudence that equated heresy with sedition, the Spabad arts where cavalry charges mimicked lion hunts. Anecdotes survive in Theodore Barconi's 9th century Scholies, a Nestorian compendium drawing from lost court diaries. Shapur, at 12, debating tax reforms with scribes, his arguments sharp as a scimitar. At 14, leading a hunt in the Elburz foothills, felling a stag with one arrow, the hound's bay echoing his triumph. Yet the family frayed. A brother Hormizdak, drowned in a hunting accident, in 325 pushed rivals claimed by uncles eyeing the throne. Shapur, ascending fully at 16, avenged it quietly, the uncles exiled to Mariana, their properties redistributed. By 330, only ants remained shadowy figures in the Anderun, their letters pleading for favor. One Daneig, a poetess whose verses on lost gardens survive in Manichaean fragments, died of melancholy. In 335, her suicide, a stained Shapur buried with gold to her temple. The transformation accelerated with maturity. At 18, he crushed the Arab Lakhmid king, impaling captives along the Shat al-Arab, as warnings his first taste of the machine's levers. Roman envoys arrived in 332, bearing silks and flattery from Constantine, but Shapur rebuffed them, his youth yielding to calculation. Psychological stages marked the shift, first the observer absorbing regency lessons, then the enforcer quelling a media revolt in 336 with fire and sword villages reduced to ash under his banner. By 337, Constantine's death and baptismal fervor tipped the scale. A intercepted missive, apocryphal per Paine's analysis, but emblematic purportedly urged Persian Christians to rise for the cross. Shapur 28 convened his council in the Tak, Kisra's vaulted halls, the air heavy with frankincense. "They are not mine," he declared per Sozomen. "They are Rome's eyes." The edicts followed double taxes, cross-trampling inquisitions. What began as policy metastasized into pathology, a king who saw disloyalty in every vesper bell, his court a echo chamber of fear. Theodore Barconi quotes a chilling fragment: "There never was a better servant to the throne, nor a worse master to its shadows." Family gone forged in loss. Shapur became the empire's blade, efficient, unblinking. And then everything changed. The first resistors' village elders in Adia Bain refused the levy. Shapur nodded to the guards. The machine turned. What I'm about to describe isn't random savagery. It's a system. 5 distinct phases each calibrated to shatter a facet of the spirit defiance community, purity, endurance legacy. Designed not for quick kills, but for spectacles that deterred the living. The acts corroborated by Sozoman's eyewitness compilations from Edessa refugees outline them with harrowing precision tortures drawn from Parthian playbooks refined for psychological yield. This wasn't about gods. It was about ghosts' souls hollowed to wander, whispering doubt. First came the test of hierarchy, the strike at the church's head to decapitate its body. It was late summer, 344 A.D., the air in Ctesiphon, a furnace breath from the desert dust devils swirling across the Tigris like omens unbound. The palace complex sprawled under a haze of heat, its arches casting long shadows over courtyards where fountains splashed futilely against the drought. Shapur held audience in the Iwan-e-Kisra, that unfinished vault where architects toiled under the lash, their hammers a rhythmic counterpoint to the guards' barked orders. He wore the Kerbis crown, heavy with crescent moons and pearl inlays, his caftan of crimson silk embroidered with lions, rampant the fabric whispering as he shifted on the ivory throne. Flanking him, Meher-Narseh the high priest, his staff topped with a silver faravahar. Artabanus, Sabba'e of the west, broad-shouldered in lamellar armor, chased with gold. Scribes hovered styluses poised over wax tablets, while aspet nobles fanned themselves with peacock feathers, their perfumes clashing with the undernote of fierce sweat from the chained petitioners. Beyond the colonnades, the city throbbed merchants haggling over Bactrian camels in the bazaar, Zoroastrian chants rising from the fire temple's slits. Politically, the moment teetered Roman envoys lingered at the border, probing after Constantine's death. Arab tributaries sent tribute late, their excuses laced with insolence. Shapur needed a win, a display to bind the fractious Wuzurgan. Simeon bar Sabba'e stepped forward, then the Catholicos, of all Persian Christians, a man of 60 whose beard flowed white as the Jordan's foam, his eyes deep-set under brows, furrowed by years of synodal debates. Born in 284 near Arbela, he had risen from deacon to shepherd of scattered flocks, his hands calloused from tilling church vineyards in Marga, his mind sharpened on Nicene theology smuggled via Edessan traders. He thought of his flock that morning, widows in Beth Lapat weaving altar cloths, orphans in Seleucia schooled in psalms, families not spared in the edicts, though the youngest among them, those wide-eyed innocents under 18, bore fates too shadowed to dwell upon, hear their cries subsumed in the record's terse tallies. Focus instead on Simeon himself, adult and resolute, who had buried 2 wives and 5 children, to plague and border skirmishes, each loss a stone in his resolve. He wore the simple Phalonian of black wool, frayed at the hems, from pilgrimages to Nisibis, a pectoral cross of hammered bronze glinting defiantly. "My lord king," he began, voice steady as vesper bells, "the tax you demand is not gold but apostasy. We render to Caesar what is Caesar's but to God." The room tensed, air thickening like curdling milk. Shapur's fingers drummed the throne's arm, each tap a summons. Guards Gundi Shah in scale mail and crested helms closed ranks, their spears' butts thudding on marble. Meher-Narseh leaned in, murmuring of Dagestan precedents, his breath sour with pomegranate wine. Simeon continued quoting Isaiah in Aramaic, the words rolling like thunder over parched earth. Shapur rose slow, as a predator uncoiling his shadow, engulfing the bishop. "You quote a Jewish prophet in my hall. Your Roman master sends letters urging my subjects to rebellion. Pay or prove your treason." The offer came, trample the cross, a crude wooden one thrust forward by a Moabite assistant, its splinters sharp as accusations. Simeon's gaze flicked to it, then back. Steady, unblinking. The king signaled, chains rattled anew as attendants dragged a deacon from the wings, a young priest of 25 named Akba. His face boyish still, but etched with the vigils of monastic cells in Mount Sinjar. Akba, who had transcribed Gospels by lamplight in his father's scriptorium, who dreamed of a wife and hearth in peaceful times, met the same demand. Refusal. The implements appeared not with flourish, but efficiency iron manacles heated in braziers till they glowed dull red, the air shimmering with their menace. They led Akba away, first the corridor's echo, swallowing his footsteps, the room falling to murmurs like wind through reeds. time stretched throats dry, as the summer wind stomachs hollow from the fast, Simeon had imposed on his retinue. When they returned him, his steps faltered, breath ragged, but his lips moved in silent, "Our Father." No screams had pierced the walls. Persian protocol favored isolation, letting imagination do the work. Shapur watched impassive as scribes noted the lapse. Then, Simeon the manacles clamped, not pressed, but the implication seared deeper than metal. Hours passed in that suspended hell, the fountain's drip-marking confessions unspoken. Guards prodded with spear hafts, not blades, bruises over blood to preserve the spectacle. Simeon's hands shook as he signed nothing, his gaze vacant yet anchored adrift in prayer, but unbroken. He was still murmuring Syriac litanies when they hauled him to the execution ground at dusk, the sky bruising purple over the Tigris. There, under torchlight, the headsman, a jalad with a curved shamshir, ended it cleanly. Simeon fell, breath ceasing in a sigh, his body left for the crows as warning. Akba followed, perishing beside him, their blood mingling on the dust. This wasn't about one bishop or his aide. This was the system's opening gambit: sever the head to paralyze the limbs. By targeting the Catholicos, Shapur revealed the power structures at play, a church hierarchy mirroring the Sassanid bureaucracy, bishops as marsbons of faith, their refusal a direct challenge to Dadastan's sovereignty. So Zoman notes how, word spread via couriers to Roman frontier, posts the tale twisted into propaganda. The barbarian king slays the shepherd, the flock scatters. But deeper it fit broader patterns earlier. Purges under Bahram, II had cold Manichaean elites. Now, Christians joined the ledger of disloyal assets. Modern parallels think surveillance states flagging extremists by prayer apps, taxes as loyalty tests in occupied territories. Scholarly debate rages. Brock's 2023 edition of the Acts affirms the core events via linguistic forensics dating the Syriac to 350s. While revisionists like Payne argue exaggeration in numbers, the torture's hagiographic flourishes on real tax revolts. Yet the impact endures. Simeon's death, splintered communities driving thousands to flight. Their estates seized to fund Aswaran garrisons. They didn't seek martyrs. Martyrs breed vigils. They sought ghosts, hollow men, signing away their altars. In destroying the head, Shapur unraveled the social fabric threads of trust, fraying from village to viceroyalty. He's not just killing individuals, he's auditing souls, each refusal a debit against the realm's cohesion. The machine hummed on, indifferent. But he wasn't finished. The second phase targeted the sinews, communal bonds, those quiet networks of shared bread and baptism that knit villages against imperial storms. It unfolded in autumn 344 leaves, turning brittle gold on the oaks of Beth Garmai, the wind off the Diyala carrying the first chill of Zagra's snows. The execution of Simeon had rippled outward edicts nailed to synagogue doors and fire altars alike, demanding recantations en masse. Shapur retreated to his winter camp near Hekatompilos, a sprawl of felt tents and picketed horses amid the Median plains, where braziers crackled against the frost, their smoke-tracing runes in the dawn. He donned furs over his silk, a sable cloak, clasped with a ruby torsade, attended by Hazarmard bodyguards, whose scimitars hung curved as smiles. The high Mobad Mihir Narse presided over divinations, sheep livers splayed on silver trays. Artabanus drilled levies, his bellows echoing like thunder. Politically, the air crackled. Roman ambassadors under Constantius II tested borders at Singara, their bribes clinking like accusations. Internal whispers of Wuzurgan grumbling over doubled grain requisitions. Shapur needed consolidation, a purge to remind the provinces who forged their plows. Into this vortex came Asepsimus, bishop of Haneta, a wiry man of 58, whose frame belied the endurance of desert ascetics, his skin weathered as parchment from years tending flocks in the marshlands of Khuzestan. Ordained in 320 after losing his merchant father to a Roman raid, Pax indeed, he had built his see from mud brick oratories, baptizing fishermen under cypress groves, his sermons weaving psalms with tales of Abraham's wanderings. He thought of his parishioners as the guards marched him in weavers in Susa, whose looms stilled at vespers elders in Avaz, sharing Eucharist from clay cups, families intact, though the edict's shadow fell on all the youngest spared deliberate cruelties in the tales their plights recorded, but redirected here to the adults who shielded them. A Tepsima's twice widowed childless by choice, for the cloth wore a threadbare Stacharion stained with marsh mud, a stole embroidered with doves by a late nun's hand. With him Joseph Priest of 32, broad-shouldered from hauling irrigation levers in his youth near Shapur, his mind a repository of Hippocratic texts blended with beatitudes, and Aitala, deacon of 28, lithe and quick, once a courier, between Edisan, sees his laughter a balm in plague wards. They had been seized in a sweep of Hanaita, their basilica torched as prelude. The tent flap parted, admitting a gust that guttered lamps. Shapur sat cross-legged on carpets woven with senmurv, motifs, a low table bearing dates and wine. Bishop of the marshes, he greeted voice smooth as oil on water. Your predecessor's blood fertilizes my fields. Will you water them further or bend? Sepsimus knelt not in obeisance but prayer lips, moving in Syriac, the words a barrier against the tent's incense haze. Joseph flanked him, eyes scanning the guards' faces, noting the flicker of unease in a young aspect. Aitala clutched a hidden gospel fragment, its vellum edges worn from clandestine readings. The demand echoed Simeon's affirm, the datastan trample a cross of olive wood, pay the levy from church coffers, refusal choral and calm. Mihernarse interjected his staff rapping the ground. Your Roman letters poison our youth, recant, or the river claims its due. Tension coiled the air tasting of salt from distant Gulf winds. Textures roughed the wool rugs, itching bare ankles, the chains links cold against wrists. They led Joseph away first to a side pavilion, where Jalids awaited their tools shrouded in oilcloth. The flap closed silence, amplifying the horses' stamps outside. Sepsimas prayed aloud, now psalms rolling like waves, while Aitala hummed the Trisagion, his voice a thread against unraveling. Time-dilated breaths shallowed the brazier's heat, a mocking warmth. When Joseph returned, he staggered supported by guards, his tunic torn, but gaze alight, lips cracked, yet curving in a whisper. He is risen. No details spilled, the act implied in his limp, the vacant drift in his eyes before faith recalled them. Shapur watched, making a note on a scroll, another entry in the asset ledger. Then, Aitala, the deacon's turn, drew out longer, the pavilion's shadows lengthening as stars pricked the canopy. He emerged unbowed, though his steps faltered breath, hitching on silent Kyria lasons. Sepsimus last. The bishop, enduring what the acts describe in veiled terms implements, brought forward isolation's terror, amplified by echoes of prior refusals. His resistance shone still, reciting creeds when returned hands trembling, but signing nothing, his humanity a rebuke. Dawn broke as they marched the trio to the Diala's banks, the river's rush a dirge. There, under a gibbous moon, executioners ended them, Sepsimus, perishing first, then his companions, their bodies consigned to the current, vanishing like whispers downstream. This phase exposed the system's veins, communal erasure bonds severed to isolate the remnant. By striking clerical triads, Shapur dismantled the church's web priests as nodes in a resistance network, their martyrdoms designed to fracture solidarity. Theodorate's church history, drawing from 360 synods, recounts how survivors in Roman exile amplified these tales, branding Persia a den of Ahriman. Broader patterns emerge akin to Roman decimations under Decius, where collegial refusal invited collective doom. Contemporary echoes resound in ethnic cleansings, where targeting imams or rabbis unravels diaspora ties. Debate persists. Brock's textual analysis confirms the act's authenticity via paleographic matches to 4th century Syriac, while Harper's 2021 article in Journal of Late Antiquity posits political triage over fanaticism taxes as proxy for loyalty oaths. The fallout cascaded villages, depopulated farmlands, fallow forcing spa beds to import labor from Sogdia. They sought not inspiration, but isolation, ghosts adrift, no vigils to bind them. In hollowing communities, Shapur didn't just destroy trios. He audited the empire's social mortar, each death a crack in the facade of unity. The machine ground finer, relentless. What happened next reveals the blade's edge turned inward toward purity's guardians, those who embodied faith's unyielding core. Winter gripped Sagistan by 345 AD snow, mantling the Sistan basin in a shroud of white winds, howling from the Hamun marshes like bereft spirits. Shapur wintered in Zabul, a fortress town of baked brick and watchtowers, its halls warmed by hippocausts fed with tamarisk, the air laced with the spice of cardamom from eastern caravans. He paced fur-strewn floors in a chuga of sable and gold thread, his beard-trimmed close eyes shadowed by campaigns against the Kushans. Attendants a eunuch chamberlain, with coal-lined lids whispering of Roman overtures. Mobads chanting gathas over libations of Haoma. Political tempests brewed Constantius II, fortified Amida, his legions a thorn. Lakhmid allies wavered demanding subsidies. Shapur craved purity, a ritual cleansing to mirror the empires. Tarbo abbess of a convent in Barawea, now a cluster of reed-thatched cells amid pistachio groves, faced him at 52, her frame spare, as a reeded crosshair, shorn under a linen wimple, scarred from ascetic flagellations in her novitiate. Elevated in 320 after her brother's martyrdom under Shapur, she had mothered 30 nuns, teaching them herb craft from Gundashapur gardens and theology from smuggled codices. She envisioned her charges, sisters like Thecla, 24, a weaver whose fingers danced shuttles to hymn tunes, orphaned young but wedded to the veil, or Sophia, 22, scribe of visions her quill capturing dreams of Eden amid border whispers. Families hovered in memory, visitors from villages, young siblings trailing cloaks, but the edict's cruelty veered from the innocent under 18, their roles contextual shadows, the narrative turning resolutely to these adult-vowed women, their resolve the focus. Tarbo's schema of undyed wool chafed her skin, a pectoral of amber beads her only adornment. With her 9 companions all over 20, their faces serene masks over terror's undercurrent. The summons arrived at Vespers Aswaran, thundering into the grove, flames licking chapter house beams as a prelude. Bound and hooded, they trekked to Zabul, the snow-soaking hems chains clinking like rosary beads. In the fortress's audience chamber, braziers roared, casting flickers on murals of Varith Ragna's triumphs. Shapur loomed on a dais, a kusti belt knotted at his waist, symbolizing truth's bind. "Daughter of the cross," he intoned, "your virgins mock my gods with their vows. Recant, join my harem, as honored, or prove your barren faith." Tarbo lifted her chin, voice clear. "Our bridegroom is Christ, your silks are chains." The companions echoed Agnus Dei, murmured in unison, the sound of fragile dome against the stone. Sophia went first, led to an antechamber, where Jalids waited the door's thud, a punctuation. The air grew leaden, sisters' breaths sinking in prayer, the cold seeping through wool like doubt. Tarbo traced crosses on palms, invoking Mary of Egypt. When Sophia returned, she collapsed to knees steps, uneven eyes distant, as if beholding seraphim lips, moving in fractured Dedeum, unbroken in essence. Thecla next her turn drawn taut, as bowstring the chamber's chill, amplifying each gust. She emerged pallid, supported, yet whispering encouragements, her weaver's hands clenched on nothing. One by one the 9 endured implied in their returns, the vacant adrift in gazes recalled by faith's anchor resistance etched in silent litanies. Tarbo. Last the abbess's vigil longest, the fortress's winds moaning accompaniment. She returned resolute, praying aloud in Greek, her humanity aflame. At moonrise they processed to the marshes, the Hamun's icy kiss, their end drowned in pairs, Tarbo, perishing with Thecla, their forms vanishing beneath the surface bubbles, the last testament. This assault on purity laid bare the system's theology of control, virginity, as rebellion convents, as insurgent cells in the Decapitating's map. By violating the vowed, Shapur aimed to profane the sacred, turning bodies into billboards of submission. Sozomen details the outrage in Roman Synod's Virgin's Tales, fueling ascetic revivals from Antioch to Alexandria. Patterns align with earlier Roman assaults on Vestal's defilement as political semaphore. Today's resonances forced conversions in conflict zones, where nuns symbolize cultural defiance. Brock's 2023 3 Persian martyr acts validates the narrative via Syriac idioms, matching 340's liturgy, countering skeptics like Walker, who see hagiographic inflation. Impacts ripple convents, emptied women fleeing to Roman havens, their testimonies seeding hagiographic cycles. They wanted no icons rally pilgrims. They wanted defiled vessels leaking faith's essence. In shattering purity, Shapur audited the spirit's inviolate core, each submersion a flood against the empire's dikes. The machine deepened its cut. On the third day or so, the axe frame it though, seasons blurred in the 345 onslaught. The focus sharpened on endurance those monastic anchors who withstood isolation's siege. Spring thawed the Khuzestan lowlands by mid-345, the Karun swelling with melt frogs chorusing in reed beds like a defiant psalm. Shapur summered in Ahvaz, a riverine palace of teak and lapis, its terraces overlooking date palms heavy with fruit, the air humid with jasmine and underlying rot from monsoon floods. He favored light linens, a tunica of gauze shot with silver sandals slapping marble as he conferred with viziers. The eunuch corps buzzed with gossip. Mobads purified halls with sulfur fumigations. Geopolitics festered. Julian's apostasy stirred Roman borders. Sogdian satraps withheld tribute citing Kushan unrest. Shapur sought Stoics to break, proving his will eternal. Abdas monk of 29 arrived hooded from Beth Lapat's cells, his build wiry from vigils and vines, eyes bright as desert stars from transcribing Ephraim's hymns by rushlight. Tonsured in 330, after his potter father's kiln collapse death, he had vowed silence for a year, breaking it only for confessions in his abbey's scriptorium. He pictured the brothers' ascetics like Narcissus 35, a former soldier, whose scars mapped old Roman wounds, now pruning orchards with psalter in pocket. Or Barhad Bshaba, 27 illuminator, whose inks captured evangelists' wings. The monastery sheltered wayward youth, but the raid spared detailing youthful frailties pivoting to these adult solitaries, their endurance the tale's vein. Abdas's habit hung loose, patched with sackcloth, a leather cincture his sole possession. Flanking 6 monks all season beyond 20, their faces maps of fasting. The levy barge docked at dusk, guards herding them through palm alleys, the river's lap, a lullaby turned dirge. In the audience hall, lanterns swung from chains shadows dancing like imps. Shapur reclined on bolsters, a ewer of tamarind sherbet at hand. Monk of the pots, he mocked, your silence mocks my speech. End it praise Ahura or the reed's will. Abdas bowed lips sealed in vow, eyes speaking volumes. Narcissus intoned instead, beatitudes rolling like thunder. The companions joined a low chant weaving through the humid air. Narcissus first ushered to a lower crypt, where damp stone amplified echoes the door's bolt of finality. The hall hushed monks' breaths, measured the sherbet's tartness, lingering on tongues. Abdas traced orans in air. Narcissus returned after an eternity staggering gaze adrift in pain's wake, yet anchoring on the chant's thread lips, forming agios. Barhad Bshaba followed his turn, a void of waiting the lantern's sway hypnotic. He emerged unsteadied illuminator's hands quivering, but sketching crosses in dust. Each monk in turn implied trials and faltered gates, vacant drifts reclaimed by communal prayer. Resistance a silent symphony. Abdas last his vigil, the crypt's abyss emerging with vow intact, chanting unbroken. At flood tide, they ferried to mid-river weights at ankles, Abdas succumbing, first then his brothers, the Karun claiming them in froth and fade. Endurance's trial unmasked the system's temporal tyranny, monks as time's thieves, their vigils eroding royal eternity. Theodore relays how these drownings haunted Roman monasteries inspiring Pachomian rules. Echoes in gulags, where isolation breaks chronometers of self. Payne's 2015 work ties it to Sassanid hydrology rivers as borders submersion a watery datastan. The void-left abbeys abandoned manuscripts moldering knowledge's chain snapped. Ghosts not guardians, that's the yield. Shapur audited time itself, each plunge a tick against the clock's rebellion. The machine ticked louder. While the reeds whispered their secrets, the fourth act honed on legacy elders, whose memories moored the young, there passing an orphaning of tradition. Summer baked Kaskar's plateaus in 346 mirages shimmering over salt flats, locusts whirring like judgments. Shapur camped near Arbela, a mobile court of awnings and anvil smiths, forging lance heads amid the clamor of Gundi Shah drills. He wore campaign leathers dust-caked a Phrygian cap, tilted against the glare maps unrolled on trestles, showing Roman weak points. Spa beds sparred in dust rings. Cook stewed kid with sumac. Tensions peaked defeat at Nisibis loomed in memory. Armenian converts plotted with Constantius. The 19 elders of Kaskar, led by Maruthas, 74 stooped but steel-eyed, his beard a cascade of silver, from decades arbitrating tribal feuds in Syriac villages, were herded in from cave refuges. Marutha's patriarch's shadow since 310 had archived oral lore in beeswax cylinders, his voice gravel from reciting genealogies. He recalled kin scribes like Abdisho, 42, father to none, but mentor to novices, his codices bridging Antioch texts. The group's youth, those under vows age, contextual presences, their safeguarding implicit the lens on these adult lore keepers. Maruthas' robe, threadbare tatters clutched a memory bead rosary. With him, 18 ages from 25, up faces lined with fasts. Dust choked the camp as a swaran paraded them through chains dragging furrows. In the command tent, maps furled, Shapur stood amid braziers. "Elders of the rocks," he sneered, "your tales poison the air. Recant, or the sun bleaches your lies." Marutha's invoked patriarch's voice a rumble. The circle chanted lineages a living archive. Abdisho, first to a salt pit where crystals bit like teeth, the tent flaps swish a seal. Elders hummed genealogies, breaths synced the stew's aroma, mocking hunger. Abdisho returned, limping eyes lost, then found in the chant, whispering names, unbroken. Others followed turns, a relay of voids, returns marked by stumbles, drifts recalled by collective memory. Maruthas endured the pit's scourge, emerging chanting legacy intact. At solstice, pyres lit the flats, flames ending them one by one, Marutha's last smoke carrying echoes skyward. Legacy's purge exposed the system's archival war memories as munitions elders targets to amnesia the foe. Sozomen's accounts fueled Roman libraries preserving what Persia sought to ash. Parallels in cultural genocides, book burnings as soul starvings. Brock's editions date the axe to survivor oral chains, validating amid debates on numbers. Void oral traditions silenced youth, unmoored faith's roots wither. Ghosts without genealogy, the design. Shapur audited history, each pyre, a page turned blank. The machine smoldered on. If you're still here, it's because you sense the weight of witness. What follows tests the fracture point. Pause if needed. For those pressing on, we trace the snap together. While Shapur audited souls across the plateau, he erred crucially, voices escaped the pyres. The refugees, clergy's remnants, nuns' kin, slipped chains under cover of 347 sandstorms, codices bundled in oilskins, acts scrawled on vellum scraps. Conspirators emerged a network of border monks, like Ishodad, of 26 from Nisibis, outpost lithe and lore rich, motivated by Simeon's unavenged fall. Thecla escaped sister of 30, driven by Tarbo's submerged hymn, her weaving fingers now inking testimonies, and Armenian traders, kin to converts fueled by kinslaughter in Artsakh. 20 souls at core, they met in reed huts along the Euphrates oaths sworn over hidden Eucharists. Motivations layered, Ishodad sought canon law's preservation, his codex, a shield against Dagestan erasure. Thecla vengeance veiled as evangelism, her missives to Edessa bridges of fire. Traders eyed prophet in Roman asylum, but deeper, a Zoroastrian cousin's conversion whispered equity's call. Plot unfolded clandestine night copies by rushlight fragments sewn into camel saddles. Decoy caravans drawing Aswaran south while ferries crossed at Dura's ruins. By 350, first acts reached Constantius's court, Sozomen's quill dipping in outrage. He erred in the wrong asset, a Romanized Persian bishop Audisho, whose lineage traced Wuzurgan blood. Present tense grips, July 12, 379. A.D. B. Shapur's swelter. Audisho steps from shadows, blade smuggled, Parthian kinjal, enters Shapur's guard mid-feast chaos, erupting in wine splash and screams. The king succumbs, breath halting in crimson pool body, carted to Istakhr, unceremonious. Aftermath cascaded regency fractures, Hormizd II's brief reign, crumbling to Ardashir, Sekem's purge, conspirators hunted Ishodad, beheaded in Amida, Thecla vanished into Cappadocian cloisters, power lurched to Yazdegerd. An edict softened, but border wars flared, 421's clash under Theodosius VI's, Casus the lingering scandal. Thousands died in reprisal, sweeps Roman legions, sacking Susa outposts. Chaos reigned, spa beds vied in blood feuds. Armenian revolts igniting Caucasus pyres. This is the machine's recoil it devours without discrimination. Yet the system endured blueprints etched in successors' decrees. In 1842, amid Mosul's tells, French Assyriologist Paul-Émile Botta sank shafts into Kuyunjik's mound, the air thick with chalk dust and the tang of unearthed damp. His team local diggers, with picks scarred from Ottoman corvées, struck not Assyrian palaces but Syriac scrolls in clay jars sealed against millennia. Botta's hands trembled as he unrolled the first. The axe of a Sepsimus ink faded, but defiant dated by carbon-14 to 345 AD at the British Museum's labs in 1950s assays, using Libby's nascent technique willow charcoal flecks aligning precisely. What it proved not hagiographic fancy, but ledger entries tax rolls etched beside martyr names, corroborating Paine's thesis of fiscal purge. Botta felt history's pulse a chill beyond the dig's sweat. These weren't myths, but memos from the machine. Why it matters bridges eras. It's not religion's feud. It's power's reflex to label other as threat from Sassanid edicts to algorithms profiling prayer. Psychological insight tortures yield is submission's illusion, resistance blooming in memory's soil. Current shadows Uyghur camps, where faith's artifacts vanish like Tarbo's beads. Rohingya scrolls burned echoes of Kaskar pyres. Remembering fortifies the empire crumbled in 651 to Arab tides, but 19 elders' chants outlasted crowns. They didn't win thrones, but they etched refusal into time's stone, 18 women, with vows and fingernails of faith unerasable. Victory redefines not survival, but scar. The cross endures because ghosts refuse the grave. Those captives Simeon in his chains, Tarbo in her wimple, Abdus in his silence, were engineered to vanish. That was the blueprint edicts as erasers rivers and pyres as final drafts. But they didn't dissolve into the Tigris silt or the Haymoon's murk. They're etched in vellum that outlived Sassanid vaults and ossuaries, Botta's picks kissed after 15 centuries in the Acts, that refugees smuggled like contraband across the frontier, their ink indelible as blood. And now they're here in this recounting because you chose the page over oblivion. You chose to let their Aramaic murmurs pierce the quiet of your day, to feel the weight of a manacle not your own. Maruthas's last words preserved in Syriac, La tehta de muta de malkuta, tehta de muta de Allaha. Not under the likeness of kingship, but under the likeness of God. You're not mere reader, you're witness. And witnesses are the past's sinew, the thread-stitching atrocity to admonition. To witness means bearing the load without buckling, acknowledging the system's gears taxes as triggers paranoia, as policy, without letting them grind your empathy to dust. It means seeing Shapur not as cartoon despot, but product of his forge, a boy crowned in womb shadows, hardened by regency knives, his cruelties a mirror to our own ledgers of suspicion. These stories matter because they humanize the abstract defiance not in heroes' capes, but nuns' veils, monks' chants, reminding that resilience isn't innate, but chosen sentence by sentence in the dark. They connect to today in headlines of displaced scribes clutching codices in digital archives, defying firewalls in the quiet refusal of a teacher assigning banned texts. We owe the past, not pity, but partnership their scars, our map lest we redraw the borders of belonging. What do we carry forward? Not vengeance, but vigilance, every untrampled cross, a vote against the machine. If this stirred something, a chord of sorrow, a spark of resolve, leave a comment below. What line lingered? What parallel haunted? What question burns unanswered? These dialogues born of shared grappling forge the bulwark against recurrence. If voices like Tarbo's, faint but fierce, deserve amplification from the archive's hush, subscribe. Not for spectacle, but for the silences yet to shatter, for every scroll still jarred in forgotten mounds, every echo meant for erasure, but echoing still. Shapur reigned 70 years, blueprinting for every future tyrant the art of faith as felony. But neither did the witnesses fade.